It's so pretty. How can we turn that off? Rabbi Baruch Chait singing Osa Shalom from his album. We worked our way all the way through his first Kol Salonika album. This was from Kol Salonika Volume 5. One of these days we'll get back to Volumes 2, 3, and 4. How's everybody doing? It's great to be with you on a Sunday. Let's light up the darkness. And who is with us on a Sunday evening, ready to learn some beautiful Gemara? Stephen in New Hampshire, James in Indianapolis, Melissa in Great Neck, Bella in Florida, Tom in PA, Yehud in South Carolina, Paul in the Great Northwest, Lucy in Minnesota, Elsa in Texas, Clarice says Erev Tov, Michael in broiling hot Dallas, may you get coolness soon. Guy in Ohio, Paula loves the song, John in Maine, Bill in mid-Missouri. And over there on the YouTube side, Aoife in Florida and Michelle in Washington State. Welcome, everybody. Great to have you with us. Turn that off. Okay, where are we? Why do you do that to me, Facebook? Okay, where are we? This is tractate 14 of the Talmud, Yevamos, the laws of levirate marriage. We are approaching the end, my friends. We're on page 111, dealing with Mishnahs 6 and 7 tonight here in chapter 13. This is page 111 of 122 pages in this tractate. Generally speaking, these are the laws of levirate marriage. This chapter is about the intersection of the laws of marriage pertaining to a minor girl who was married off to a man by her family, and she has a right of refusal. She can walk away from that marriage anytime she wants. Because she can walk away from that marriage anytime she wants, it's considered not a full marriage. It's not really a marriage by Torah law. It's a marriage by rabbinic law because of this conditional nature of it that she can walk away. If that husband dies while he's married to this minor girl and he hasn't had a child and he leaves a brother, so now yibum applies, but this partial nature of the marriage, or let's say incomplete nature of the marriage, now is going to create complications on the law of levirate marriage, on the law of yibum. Incidental to this, the sages are also bringing in cases of a wife who is a deafmute, which in ancient times was somebody who was considered not legally competent, particularly on the law of chalitzah. A chalitzah is the alternative to yibum. When a man dies childless, leaving a brother and a widow, if they don't want to marry each other, they perform chalitzah. But in order to perform chalitzah, she has to read certain verses from the Torah out loud. And the deaf mute is unable to do that. So it's a problem, and she may not be eligible to perform chalitzah because of it. Here in this Mishnah number 6, which we're continuing its discussion today, is like a complicated case, right? And kind of a little bit challenging to keep track of, about a man who was married to two orphaned minors, meaning they lost their father, they were married off by their family to him, and they have that right of refusal. And then he dies, but he leaves a brother. So if the brother performs chalitzah with one of these girls, is the other one exempt? If they were adult wives, certainly if he performed chalitzah with one of them, the other is exempt. But because they're minors or because they're deaf mutes in the second case, complication. Really the question is, are they fully his wife, and how does that impact the law of yibum? So we picked this up on 111a, and it is taught in a baraisa. Baraisa is a teaching contemporaneous with the Mishnah, but not quite as authoritative as the Mishnayos, which are included in the Mishnah, but still considered very authoritative. So, in this Baraisa, two brothers married two orphaned sisters, meaning they're minors, but they're also sisters. So now we're going to include the complication of A man can have multiple wives, a woman can only have one husband, but a man cannot be married to a woman and her sister. In fact, even if he divorces his wife, he can never marry her sister as long as his wife is alive. So the fact that two brothers marry two sisters and then one of the brothers dies now is going to add another level of complication, because the one who's already married to one of these sisters cannot marry the next sister. In fact, we learned at the beginning of this tractate that if you're married to a woman and your brother is married to her sister and then your brother dies, that woman doesn't come before you for yibum. Chalitzah isn't even required, because if you married her, then you'd be married to a woman and her sister. She's prohibited to you, so she's exempt from chalitzah. But if the original marriage, the underlying marriage, is not a full marriage, so now are we sure that it is prohibited to marry the sister as well? Okay, so let's listen to the Baraisa. Two brothers married two orphaned sisters. One of them a minor and one of them a deafmute. Okay, now they're not looking for realism here. They're looking for as much complexity as possible to test whether we understand the underlying principles. Two brothers married two sisters. They're both minors, but one is simply a minor. The other is also a deafmute. All right, so if maybe the one who's a deafmute isn't a minor anymore, let's say, but she was orphaned. Now, if the husband of the minor dies, they're brothers. If the husband of the minor girl dies, so she comes before her husband died. She comes before her husband's brother for yibum, but her husband's brother is the husband of her deaf-mute sister. So does she come before him for yibum? The deaf-mute must be released by means of a bill of divorce due to her sister's levirate bond, and the minor must wait until she reaches majority and then perform chalitzah. Now this is a little bit crazy, right? So the husband of the minor dies. The husband of the minor dies, so the minor comes before his brother, yibum. Now they're saying here that the deaf-mute girl who's happily married to her husband, he's alive, she's alive, but now he has to divorce her because he cannot perform chalitzah with her sister, I guess because she's a minor. But I think we learned somewhere else that a minor girl can perform chalitzah, but let's assume that's not possible here according to some opinion. So what's going on is, even though the deaf-mute is happy with her husband, he has to divorce her so that he can marry the minor and then divorce her, and he's going to end up married to none of them. Why does he have to do that? Why can't he just keep his own wife and the other one is exempt? Let's just keep reading. Right? So if the husband of the minor dies and she comes before the husband of the deaf-mute for yibum, so then the deaf-mute must be released by means of a bill of divorce because of her sister's levirate bond, because the man can't be bound to both a woman and her sister. Even though he's already married to one, you would think, well, then the other one is dismissed, but rather they're saying he has to divorce his own wife. Then the minor must wait until she reaches majority, and then she performs chalitzah, and he ends up married to neither one of them. But if the deaf-mute's husband dies, then the minor must be released by means of a bill of divorce, and the deaf-mute is forbidden forever. He must divorce the minor because of the levirate bond with her sister. He may not consummate the levirate marriage with the deaf-mute because she is his ex-wife's sister. And he cannot perform chalitzah with her because she's a deaf-mute and she can't recite the verses from the Torah in the chalitzah ceremony, so he can't perform chalitzah with her. And if he transgresses and consummates yibum with the deaf-mute, he's not allowed to do that because he's married to her sister. But if he does it anyway, then he gives her a bill of divorce afterward, and then she's released, but perhaps he keeps his own wife. Now, granted, this argument works if you say the deaf-mute is partially acquired and the minor is either acquired or not acquired, meaning neither is a complete marriage, but there's a difference between the deaf-mute and the minor. And the way so one understanding is that the deaf-mute It's not a marriage by Torah law, but she's partially acquired as his wife. Whereas the minor, if he marries her, it's not a marriage by Torah law, it's a marriage by rabbinic law due to uncertainty. They might be married, they might not be married, as opposed to partially married. Okay, so if you say that the deaf mute is partially acquired and the minor is uncertainly acquired, so it is due to that reason that if he transgresses and consummates the yibum with the deaf mute girl, so he gives her a bill of divorce and she's released. You would say she is released whichever way you look at it. If the minor is fully acquired by her husband, she's in the case of uncertainty, but actually she's fully acquired by her husband, then the deaf mute is released because she's the sister of his wife, who is a forbidden relative, and as such, she's entirely exempt from yibum or chalitzah. And if the minor is not acquired at all, it's a case of uncertainty. So you're testing the two cases. Is she actually his wife or is she not his wife at all? So if the minor is not his wife at all, then he may rightly consummate yibum with her and then afterward divorce her because of the uncertainty. But if you say the opposite, that the deaf mute is the one who's uncertainly acquired by him, i.e. the status of marriage with a deaf mute is uncertain, while the marriage with the minor is a case of partial acquisition, then when he transgresses and has intercourse with the deaf mute girl, so why should he give her a bill of divorce and she thereby is released? It is an invalid sexual act as the minor is partially acquired, which disqualifies her sister from levirate marriage, right? If you're partially acquired, then you're at least somewhat acquired, and that disqualifies her sister. Making it impossible, and an invalid sexual act does not exempt her, i.e. it does not constitute full consummation of yibum, making it possible for him to divorce her. If they're not fully married, they can't get divorced. Still, she requires chalitzah because of the uncertainty, and a deaf mute cannot perform chalitzah. Therefore, it must be, as Rav Chisda suggested, that the deaf mute is partially acquired while the minor is acquired with a case of uncertainty. Now the Gemara rejects the conclusion that the Baraisa provides evidence for Rav Chisda's explanation. Well, how is this proving Rav Chisda's position? It doesn't, because it is possible to say, in accordance with whose opinion is this Baraisa? It is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Nehemiah, who said an invalid sexual act also exempts a woman from chalitzah. You weren't supposed to do it, but you did it. Now that you did it, she's actually exempt from chalitzah. So the Gemara asks, if one accepts the suggestion that this baraisa is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Nehemiah, say that the latter clause of this same baraisa, which states, consider the case of one who was married to two orphans, a minor and a deaf mute, and he died. If the Yavam, the surviving brother, had intercourse with the minor, and then he had intercourse with the deaf mute. Now, if a man had two wives, and he dies, and he leaves a brother, does the brother ever have intercourse with both wives? Why is he having intercourse with any of them? To make yibum, right? To consummate levirate marriage. How can he do that? Because his brother died childless, and this is going to override the prohibition on a man to ever have sexual intercourse with his brother's wife, even if his brother died. It's only because the brother died childless that yibum applies. But when yibum applies, if there were two wives and he performs yibum with one of them, the other one is exempt. She's done. She needs neither yibum nor chalitzah. She's free to go off and marry anyone. He can never have intercourse with both of the wives, thinking to perform yibum with both of them and marry both of them. How does this even come up? Because one of the wives might not be a wife at all because of this marriage by rabbinic law, because one is a case of partial acquisition and the other is a case of uncertain acquisition. And because of that uncertainty, then maybe he might perform yibum with both of them, but obviously it's very problematic. Okay, but let's trace out what happens. So consider the case of one who was married to two orphans, a minor and a deaf mute, and he died. So if the surviving brother, the Yavam, had intercourse with the minor, and then he had intercourse with the deaf mute, and the order is important, or if one of his brothers had intercourse with the deaf mute, after the first brother engaged in intercourse with the minor, again, if they weren't a minor or a deaf mute, this would never happen. As soon as there's one brother who has intercourse with one of the wives, they perform yibum, and any other wife is exempt, and any other brother is out of the picture from this yibum situation. But here, so one of the brothers so the Yevam had intercourse with the minor, and then he had intercourse with the deaf mute. Or if one of his brothers had intercourse with the deaf mute after the first brother engaged in intercourse with the minor, so they are both forbidden to the first brother, both girls. How can their situation be rectified? The deaf mute must be released with a bill of divorce because the Yavam had intercourse with her first. It's a case of partial acquisition or uncertain acquisition. We don't want them to stay married, so he gives a bill of divorce. And the minor waits until she reaches majority, and then she performs chalitzah, right? Because of all this uncertainty, we don't allow anybody to stay married, but in what way do we actually create the legal outcome? The proper legal outcome is he has to divorce the deaf mute, and the minor waits till she's an adult, and then she performs chalitzah. Now, granted, this law makes sense if you say that a deaf mute is partially acquired, meaning that she's considered married, even though there's something questionable about the marriage, she's married, meaning that she was never fully acquired in the first place, but somewhat acquired, and that a minor is either acquired or not acquired. That's the case of uncertainty. And that the Baraisa is in accordance with the opinion of the rabbis who state that meaning the majority against somebody else's opinion, so is in accordance with the opinion of the rabbis who state that an invalid sexual act does not exempt a woman from chalitzah. For these reasons, the minor must wait until she reaches majority, and then she performs chalitzah. So the sages decreed that she must perform chalitzah no matter what, as perhaps he may precipitately have intercourse with the deaf mute first, so that the subsequent intercourse with the minor is considered an invalid sexual act. Invalid because a Yavam already had intercourse with one of the wives, because he is already partially married to her rival wife. However, since the deaf mute is only partially acquired, her levirate marriage does not exempt the minor, and the minor must still perform chalitzah. But if you say that the Baraisa is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Nehemiah, with whom the majority disagrees, and also that the status of a deaf mute's marriage is uncertain, whereas the status of a minor is partial acquisition, then there is no explanation why the minor must perform chalitzah when she reaches majority. As he said, Rabbi Nehemiah, that an invalid sexual act exempts her. So rather conclude from this reasoning that the Baraisa is in accordance with the opinion of the rabbis. And the Gemara concludes, indeed, learn from it, that the Baraisa is in accordance with the rabbis. And that would be the end of the Gemara on Mishnah number 6, but Rav Ashi wants to get in the last word. Rav Ashi says, one may also learn this teaching from the first clause of the Baraisa, that it is in accordance with the opinion of the rabbis, as it teaches, if the man transgresses and consummates the yibum, the levirate marriage with the sister, who is a deaf mute, so then he must give her a bill of divorce afterward, and she is thereby released. And the Baraisa does not teach, if he consummates the yibum with the minor, he gives her a bill of divorce and she is released. And this is presumably because the consummation of levirate marriage, of yibum, with the minor, is an invalid sexual act, as her deaf mute sister is partially married to the brother. Even if he does engage in intercourse with her, she will still require chalitzah. But the Gemara rejects this argument of Rav Ashi. If it is due to that reason, there is no conclusive argument, as one may say that for the deaf mute, whose situation has no rectification, that is permitted because she cannot perform chalitzah, so then the Baraisa teaches a prohibited rectification. That's quite interesting. She has no out because she can't perform chalitzah, but they allow her to perform chalitzah anyway because her situation is exceptional. But the minor, whose situation has a permitted rectification in that she can wait till she's an adult and then perform chalitzah, so then the Baraisa does not teach for her a prohibited rectification. We teach the permitted manner. And that concludes the Gemaras on Mishnah number 6. Now we begin Mishnah number 7, and we're about to start page 111b. Mishnah 7. If a man was married to 2 minor orphans, okay, this man is married to 2 girls who were orphans. Their father died. Their family, mother or brothers, married them off to the same man. Makes no sense. Wait a minute. Are they sisters? No. So 2 different families. Tragically, the father of the family died. They had a minor girl, and both decided to marry their daughters to this one guy. So he now has 2 wives who are both minor girls. All right? Hypothetical. So the man was married to 2 minor orphans, and then he died. And he left a brother. And the Yavam engaged in intercourse with the first of them to consummate the levirate marriage, to consummate yibum. And then he engaged in intercourse with the second. What's he doing? We don't do that. If a man leaves 2 wives, his brother can only perform yibum with one of them. So either he's just fully transgressing, or there's this uncertainty because they're minors, okay? So if he engaged in intercourse with the first of them to consummate the levirate marriage, and then he engaged in intercourse with the second, or similarly, if his brother, who's also the Yavam, right, the one who died left 2 brothers, if his brother engaged in intercourse with the second, that's also prohibited, right? In the case of adults, if the man leaves 2 wives and his brother makes yibum with one of them, the other one is just exempt. This third brother cannot perform yibum with the co-wife. She just goes her own way. But here, similarly, to a man engaging in intercourse with both of these minor widows, or one brother makes yibum with one of them and the other brother engages in yibum with the second co-wife, okay? With the second, the Yavam of his brother. So in this case, the Yavam or his brother did not disqualify the first girl from staying married to the first man. Or if he slept with both of them, the first girl he can stay married to. It's the second one that he cannot stay married to because that was an invalid sexual act. It wasn't for the purpose of yibum because the first wife had already performed yibum. Attempting to perform yibum with the second girl, the co-wife, does not disqualify the first girl from staying married to the brother that performed yibum with her first, as her levirate marriage was in fact consummated. Likewise, if the 2 wives were 2 female deafmutes, so the first wife may remain married to the Yavam. Intercourse with the second wife, although prohibited, has no effect. It's a transgression, but it doesn't cancel the marriage to the first one. Intercourse with the second wife, the prohibited, has no effect. If the marriage was of uncertain status, then either the levirate marriage was concluded when he engaged in intercourse with the first, or neither wife was really married to the first husband, and they are therefore not rival wives. Neither wife was married to the original husband before he died. So if the initial marriage was partial, then since both wives have the same standing, the levirate marriage with the first wife fully realizes whatever degree of levirate marriage is available. But if one of the wives was a minor and the other was a deaf mute, right, so now they don't have the same status. Both have some kind of incomplete marriage to the original husband, but we're not sure if one is partial and the other is uncertain or what. So what's the outcome? If one wife was a minor and the other a deaf mute, and the Yavam engaged in intercourse with the minor, and then he engaged in intercourse with the deaf mute, or if his brother engaged in intercourse with the deaf mute, then the Yavam or his brother disqualified the minor from staying married due to the sage's decree, lest it be confused with a situation where the intercourse with the deaf mute came first. If the Yavam engaged in intercourse with the deaf mute and then engaged in intercourse with the minor, or if his brother engaged in intercourse with the minor, then the Yavam or his brother disqualified the deaf mute from staying married. The marriage to the deaf mute creates a partial acquisition that does not exempt the second wife from levirate marriage, as she, as a minor, has a different standing. Accordingly, intercourse with the second wife also creates a partial acquisition, and thereby both women are prohibited to the Yavam, as it is prohibited to consummate levirate marriage with more than one wife. And in that case, we have to undo both marriages. If one widow was legally competent and one widow was a deaf mute, and the Yavam engaged in intercourse with the legally competent woman and then engaged in intercourse with the deaf mute, or his brother engaged in intercourse with the deaf mute, so then the Yavam or his brother did not disqualify the legally competent woman from staying married. Since the Yavam consummated the levirate marriage with her first, they're married. The levirate bond was entirely dissolved, and the intercourse with the deaf mute, although forbidden, has no effect on the first marriage created with the Yavam, namely to the legally competent woman. But if the Yavam engaged in intercourse with the deaf mute and then engaged in intercourse with the legally competent woman, or if his brother engaged in intercourse with the legally competent woman, then the Yavam or his brother disqualified the deaf mute from staying married. Consummation of the levirate marriage with the deaf mute creates only a partial acquisition that does not fully dissolve the levirate bond. And so when they perform yibum with the legally competent woman second, now it disqualifies the first. And if, finally, the deceased brother had two wives, an adult and a minor, and the Yavam engaged in sexual intercourse with the adult and then in intercourse with the minor, or if his brother engaged in intercourse with the minor, so then the Yavam or his brother did not disqualify the adult from staying married, because when the first Yavam performed yibum with the adult, they became married and they dissolved the levirate bond of the co-wife. And if they then slept with the co-wife, it was a transgression, it was a sin, but it didn't affect the first marriage. But if he married the minor first, because it's some kind of incomplete, uncertain marriage, the levirate bond wasn't fully dissolved. So when he then slept with the adult, that's going to disqualify the original yibum with the deaf mute, or in this case with the minor. That one has to end either by a refusal or a chalitzah when she's old enough, and presumably they're also going to make him dissolve the marriage with the deaf mute. And Rabbi Elazar says the court instructs the minor to refuse him, thereby annulling her marriage retroactively, and then the minor is permitted to go marry any man. That's Mishnah number 7. Gemara. Rav Yehuda said that Shmuel said the law is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Elazar, and likewise the Amora, Rabbi Elazar ben Pedat, said the halacha, the law, is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Elazar ben Shemua, the rabbi of our Mishnah. The Gemara says it is necessary to rule that the minor is instructed to refuse, thus annulling her original marriage, both in this case and in the earlier case that was on page 109, the case of an adult woman who becomes the Yevama of her husband's brother, who is married to her own minor sister. For this ruling was stated only in that earlier case. For if this ruling had only been stated in that earlier case, I would have said it was in that case that Shmuel said the law is in accordance with Rabbi Eliezer due to the fact that the Yavam did not fulfill the mitzvah of yibum with an adult. In order for him to be permitted to do so, the sages rule that the minor should be instructed to refuse him. But remember, we had an opinion that we don't want to tell the minor wife to refuse her husband. She can walk away at any time, but we don't want to get into the business of telling a minor to walk away from a marriage because maybe it's a good situation for the couple. In the ancient world, and giving the financial realities and where she would be best taken care of, etc. But for this case, where the mitzvah of yibum is fulfilled, say that they must both be released with a bill of divorce. And conversely, the Tana teaches us the ruling only in this case, one would think, it is because the adult happened before him for yibum, and since both the adult and the minor are equally candidates for yibum, it makes sense to encourage the minor to refuse. However, in the other Mishnah, where the minor is already married to the Yavam, making the adult Yavama his wife's sister who is forbidden to him, she should not be encouraged to refuse. Therefore, it was necessary to state also in this case that she is nevertheless encouraged by the court to refuse her husband and walk away from that because she's a minor. And that concludes the Gemara Mishnah number 7. And now we have Mishnah number 8 in chapter 13. If a minor Yavam, a minor Yavam. So now the surviving brother, he is a minor. If a minor Yavam engaged in sexual intercourse with a minor Yavama, right? So this man was married to a girl who was a minor, and then he died, And the brother who survives him is also a minor, right? So we have a boy and a girl who are in the case of a Yavam and a Yavama, a brother and a widow. And they engaged in sexual intercourse. So they should grow up together, living as a married couple. All right, they got married very young, but they're kind of in the same condition when they did that. They were able to have sexual intercourse. They were old enough to do that. So they should grow up together. And he may not divorce her while he's a minor. If when they grow up, they decide to divorce, that's something else. But right now, they should grow up together as man and wife. If he engaged in sexual intercourse with an adult Yevama, she should raise him, i.e. they must stay married as there is no way for him to divorce her until he reaches majority. Now, didn't we learn earlier that a minor Yavam, a minor boy, I guess he definitely cannot perform chalitzah, but I guess if he's old enough to have sex with the widow of his brother and she's an adult, then they're married and he can't divorce her while he's a minor because he's not legally competent to give the legal document, the bill of divorce. But when he becomes an adult, he could divorce her then. When a Yevama, the widow, said within 30 days of her marriage, I have not engaged in sexual intercourse with him. So then the court forces him to perform chalitzah with her. If she said this after 30 days, but he claimed that he had engaged in sexual intercourse, the court asks him to perform chalitzah with her, as there are grounds to believe him. And when he admits that he did not engage in intercourse with her, even after 12 months, the court forces him to perform chalitzah with her. Why are they married and they didn't have sex? Probably because in this case he's a minor, he's unable to. And so he says he did, but she says he didn't. He's going to perform chalitzah. They're going to break this off. Once he's an adult, right? If a woman vows during her husband's lifetime to derive no benefit from her yavam, right? That if while her husband is alive, but let's say he's sick and dying, and she vows, I will derive no benefit from your brother. So now she's created a vow. She's taken a vow that makes it impossible for her to marry her husband's brother. And that takes yibum off the table. So if a woman vows during her husband's lifetime to derive no benefit from her yavam, the court forces him to perform chalitzah with her, as it is forbidden for her to engage in sexual intercourse with him to consummate the yibum, since she vowed never to benefit from this man. If she made that vow after her husband died, to derive no benefit from her yavam, the court asks her to perform chalitzah with her. And I guess there's a difference between forcing him and asking him. And if she intended to do so, i.e. she had an ulterior motive of avoiding yibum when she vowed, then even if she made the vow during her husband's lifetime, the court merely asks him to perform chalitzah with her, but doesn't force him. That's the Mishnah. Now the Gemara on this Mishnah number 8. The Mishnah teaches that a minor Yavam, the minor brother who survives the man who died, that a minor Yavam and a minor Yavama, the widow, can consummate a levirate marriage and they are permitted to live together. Now the Gemara suggests, let us say that the Mishnah is not in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Meir. As it is taught in a Baraisa, a minor boy and a minor girl may not perform chalitzah and may not enter into yibum, and this is the statement of Rabbi Meir. Now, can you guess why Rabbi Meir says that this minor boy and this minor girl cannot perform yibum together? And because yibum is off the table, chalitzah is off the table also. Is it because it's illegal for a minor boy to have sex with a minor girl? No, not in the ancient world. That is not the dispositive issue that's before us. Rather, why does a brother perform yibum with his brother's widow? So that they can have an heir that will inherit the brother who died without having had a child. And that's why we learn much earlier in the tractate that if a woman is in alonis, meaning she is sexually underdeveloped and she is sterile, she's incapable of having children, if that's a proven fact, then yibum is off the table. We're not going to let them marry each other for the purpose of having a child together if it's impossible for them to have a child together. What Rabbi Meir is suggesting here is if we let this boy and girl be together, there is no guarantee that one of them, or both for that matter, won't end up being a sexually underdeveloped person. person, right? They haven't reached puberty yet. There's no guarantee they're going to reach puberty, right? Maybe they were like, something's going to go wrong when they become sexually mature, and it's going to turn out that one or both of them is incapable of having children. Until it's established that we have some reason to believe that they're capable of having children, we don't want them to have sex, because if they do, and then it turns out that it's impossible for one of them to be a parent to children, to bear children, then the sex that they had, then it would be considered licentious, because it wasn't for the purpose it was impossible to perform yibum. And so Rabbi Meir says, don't let them do that when they're minors. Let's wait till they're adults. Everybody could just chill, wait a few years, see if they become sexually normal, be adults, right? Teenagers, but in that case, legal adults. And then if they're going to perform yibum, they could perform yibum. That's according to Rabbi Meir. So the Gemara responds, you can even say that the Mishnah is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Meir. When Rabbi Meir said that minors may not enter into levirate marriage, he was referring to an adult Yevama with a minor Yavam, or a minor Yevama with an adult Yavam. That one of them was a minor, the other one was an adult. Either way, the boy or the man or the girl or the woman or the boy. So this is because for one of them it would be a forbidden sexual act due to the uncertainty of the minor's status. Since the minor may turn out to be permanently sexually underdeveloped, the adult is forbidden from having intercourse with him or her. But in the case of a minor Yavam who has sexual intercourse with a minor Yevama, where they are both similar to one another, as neither of them is obligated in the mitzvahs, they're not legal adults, right? They're not obligated in the commandments of God. So Rabbi Meir did not state that it is forbidden for them to perform yibum. The Gemara asks, but it is taught in the Mishnah, if he, i.e. the minor Yavam, the minor boy, the brother, engaged in sexual intercourse with an adult Yavama, so she should raise him, which contradicts the explication of Rabbi Meir's opinion above. And Rabbi Hanina Chazah said it is different once he engaged in intercourse with her. Although at the outset, Rabbi Meir prohibits consummation of yibum, once it has already taken place, it is preferable that she raise him. And the Gemara asks, but it says that she should raise him, indicating that they are meant to live as a married couple, even though each and every sexual act is forbidden according to Rabbi Meir. Rather, it is clear that the Mishnah is not in accordance with Rabbi Meir, but his opinion is a minority opinion, so it is in accordance with the majority. So the Gemara asks, how can the minor enter into yibum? The verse here reads, Deuteronomy 25:7. And if the man does not wish to take his Yevama shall ascend to the gate to the elders and say, my brother-in-law refused to establish a name for his brother in Israel. He did not wish to consummate the levirate marriage. That's Deuteronomy 25:7. And since it says he did not wish to consummate, but a minor is incapable of consummating, right? So this minor is incapable of doing so, as he cannot sire children. And Abaye said that the verse states, her brother-in-law will have intercourse with her and take her to him to be his wife and consummate the levirate marriage. And this includes anyone, even one who cannot sire children. That's Abaye. Rava said, even without this interpretation, you still could not say that it is prohibited for a minor to enter into yibum. Is there a case of yibum where she is forbidden to him now, and after some time she becomes permitted? Didn't Rav Yehuda say that Rav said, any Yevama, to whom I cannot apply the verse, her brother-in-law will have intercourse with her? Deuteronomy 25:5. At the time that she happens before him for yibum, it is considered as if she were the wife of her brother who has children, meaning who is exempt from yibum, and she is consequently forbidden to him forever. It must be the case that minors can perform yibum. If it was forbidden, then they would be exempt from yibum even after reaching the age of majority. And the Gemara asks, well, say indeed a minor should be exempt from yibum and consequently forbidden from marrying his brother's wife forever. And the Gemara answers, the verse states, if brothers dwell together, indicating that this rule applies to all brothers who are alive simultaneously, even if the brother was only 1 day old. He can't perform yibum then, but when he becomes an adult, he can perform yibum. The girl has to wait for him if she can't perform chalitzah with some other brother and be released to go her own way. So the Mishnah states, when a Yevamos said, within 30 days of her marriage, I have not engaged in sexual intercourse with him, the court forces him to perform chalitzah with her. Right? So if a marriage happens and they're not having sex, and they just seem like they're not gonna have sex, like he doesn't want to have sex with her, then she can get out of that marriage. And especially if it was a case of yibum, where they're getting married for the purpose of performing yibum, but he doesn't have sex with her, then the court steps in and say, perform chalitzah with her, this isn't working out. And when do they do that? After 30 days that he didn't have sex with her. So the Gemara asks, who is the Tana of our Mishnah who taught that for up to 30 days, a person can be presumed to be able to restrain himself and resist engaging in sexual intercourse with a woman who lives with him for 30 days. But beyond 30 days, they're saying a normal man who's living with a woman as his wife will have had sex with her. And if he hasn't had sex with her within 30 days, something's wrong and he's not going to have sex with her. But up to 30 days, we'll wait. So Rabbi Yochanan said, it is the opinion of Rabbi Meir. As it is taught in a baraisa, a man may come to court to make a claim concerning virginity, i.e. that the woman he married was not a virgin. Totally separate case than what we're talking about here, but we're just using it for analogy. When can he make that claim? For 30 days after the marriage ceremony. Assuming that he makes the claim immediately following their first sexual act, his claim is credible if he makes it within the first 30 days. This is the statement of Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Yosei says, if she was secluded with him after the wedding in a place suitable for sexual intercourse, a claim concerning virginity is only credible if he brings it immediately. But if she was not secluded with him, they presumably did not have a chance to engage in intercourse, and then such a claim is credible even several years later when he comes and says, okay, we finally had sex for the first time, and she was not a virgin, and then he can make a legal claim. So Rabbah said, you can even say that the Mishnah is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yosei. Rabbi Yosei states his opinion there only with regard to a virginity claim about one's betrothed, to whom he is accustomed, and therefore he is less inhibited. But with regard to his brother's wife, where they're in a yibum situation, he is embarrassed with her, and therefore it is possible that more time passed before he engaged in intercourse with her. But how much time are we going to wait before we step in and say they have to perform chalitzah? 30 days. And that brings us to page 112a, and we're done for tonight, and I'm going to take some questions and comments. On page 111. Okay. Hopefully there was more clarity tonight, even though the cases remain complicated. Hopefully I was able to get at the underlying principles and what's at stake, and we're able to keep it straight. It's not easy. Michelle, this reminds me of a question I have, and I know it was taught, but let's say none of the brothers are unmarried by Torah law. Are any brothers acceptable or available to be her yavam? Well, the brothers don't have to be single, right? In the ancient world, a man could have multiple wives. A wife could only have one husband. So if one of the brothers, one of these other brothers was married, it wouldn't matter. Now, 1,000 years ago, the law came into our halakha, our Jewish law, that no, it's just one husband and one wife. A man cannot have multiple wives. Yibum maybe lasted a little longer than that, but not much, right? And that's why we don't perform yibum anymore. There have been a few cases in history where people wanted to perform yibum, but the fact that they wanted to made it suspect because they shouldn't be doing it, the brother and the widow, because they're attracted to each other. That's not a reason to perform yibum. It has to be an altruistic thing to create an heir for the brother that died. And that's why if a man dies, without children, leaving a widow and a brother, we make them perform chalitzah. That's the only option that there is. But at any rate, it's never been permissible under Torah law for a woman to have more than one husband. It has always been permissible for a man to have more than one wife, but a rabbinic decree ended that about 1,000 years ago. And also Michelle asks, who would care for the minor orphan? So in this case, when they're talking about a minor orphan, what they're actually meaning is a girl whose father died, right? Because in the ancient, very patriarchal society, it was the father who would decide who's this girl's going to marry. Now that he's dead, her mother can decide, or her brothers can decide to marry her off. But that's where she maintains this right of refusal that she wouldn't have if her father married her off. And again, like if both parents died, then it would be some other family members. And what we haven't covered is, well, if both parents died, okay, and she has brothers, the brothers have as much authority as the mother would have. But if there are no brothers and the parents die, so then who is taking care of her? Is it like some aunt and uncle? Do they have the same authority that a brother would have? Is she a ward of the court? They presumably would have the same authority that the brother or mother would have. But I don't know about aunts, uncles, cousins, or somebody else. Okay, there seem to be no other questions. That's what I've got for us today. God willing, tomorrow at the regular time, Monday, 6 p.m. Pacific, we'll gather for page 112. Have a great night.